Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I am privileged to welcome everybody to the October 5th, 2023 Guelph Police Services Board open meeting. Before we start the meeting, I would like to observe a moment of silence in recognition of RCMP Officer Constable Rick O'Brien, who was killed in September while executing a drug-related search warrant at a home in Coquitlam, BC. Okay, I'd now like to call the meeting to order and start with our territorial acknowledgement. We have an updated acknowledgement this month. As we gather, let us take time to reflect on our privilege to live and work in Guelph, a city built over rich Indigenous histories. We are guests here, and we should reflect upon the responsibility to care for this land, the people who live here today, and the generations to come. If our actions today can move us toward reconciliation, we should take pause and make those decisions with intention and gratitude. This place we call Guelph has served as the traditional lands and place of refuge for many peoples over time, but more specifically, the Atiwandaronk and the Haudenosaunee. This land is held as the treaty lands and the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Guelph lies directly adjacent to the Haldimand Tract and is part of a long-established traditional hunting ground for the Six Nations of the Grand River. Many First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples who have come from across Turtle Island call Guelph home. I'd like to start off now, if I can. Are there any declarations of conflict or pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Code? Hearing none, I'll declare that business closed. Next item of business is going to be presentations and delegations. There is one delegate today at the board's meeting, and we remind everyone that the delegation is allowed 10 minutes to present to the board, and that I will advise when there's a 9-minute mark. And so I'd like to introduce Ms. Barb Minette, who is here to present to us today. Barb, would you please have the floor? Yes.
Okay, for those of you who don't know me, I started the bookshelf in Guelph 50 years ago, so I've been around. In August, I read a Globe and Mail article. Can everybody hear me? Okay. About the mayor of Oshawa, the police chief, and the regional chair working together to try and at least ameliorate the crisis of substance abuse, mental illness, and homelessness in their city. The mayor of Oshawa said that the biggest mistake that he has made was putting most of the services for vulnerable people in one strip of downtown Oshawa. Of course, you all know that the same thing is happening to your and my downtown. Originally, I decided to delegate because I didn't know if there would be an extension of police walking our streets. From a business owner's point of view and from a shopper's perspective, this would have been disastrous. As a senior and also for the public at large, feeling safe is essential. But as I read in Guelph today, this initiative has at this point been extended into the fall. Extended into the fall funding is insufficient. Guelph needs long-term, ongoing funding until the situation on the ground changes. Since January, there has been a 31% increase in people using the Royal City Mission. This is a quote from Guelph Today. They are expecting that this need to keep rising. And whenever people are misbehaving inside, they are asked to leave, and so all of the action plays out on the sidewalks. We need an increase in services, not only a police presence, but also mental health workers. Virtually every time I go downtown, there is some disturbance happening on our street. The bookshelf does not have a bird's eye view. We are in the middle of a storm. Higher theft, threats to booksellers having to continually oust people to whom we have issued trespass orders. So I'm just going to give you one experience that I had about a month ago. My daughter Hannah and I were in a car coming out of the Royal Bank parking lot and wanted to turn right onto Quebec Street, but couldn't because there was one guy on top of another guy, and he was pounding the hell out of this guy's head. I have never seen anything like it. And so my instinct is to try and help. I'm sorry, I know I'm not supposed to do that, but that's my instinct. Because no one on the street was helping. Most of the people on the street were vulnerable people, and they have enough violence in their lives already. I understand that. So my daughter said, lean on the horn. So I leaned on the horn for 30 seconds. The pounder looked up a few times, but after 30 seconds, he got really confused because the noise just wasn't stopping. And that allowed the guy who was, I don't even know how he got up, because honestly, I've never seen anything like it. He went away, and the guy who was pounding walked into the Royal City Mission. Okay, that's my story. That's only one. I could give you many, many more. I invite you to come and sit on the bench outside of the bookshelf with people who eat and spend time at the mission. I often do that. Many are frightened by the violence and are distraught about all of the open drug use and erratic behavior. So that's my presentation. I'm sure that you all understand what's going on, but it is so intense. It's like frightening. And I am afraid that someone is going to really be hurt. And also I'm afraid of the peer support workers. I don't think they're trained for the level of violence that is on the street. So in closing, I would ask you to contact the City of Oshawa to see if they have been able to cobble together any intelligent programs. Extend the walking police to at least Saturday when a lot of stuff happens, and work towards this being a permanent feature of police scheduling. Bring public health into this arena. There are so many public health issues, and I could be wrong, but I don't see them participating in any meaningful way. Work more closely with the Royal City Mission. There is a lot going on there that needs monitoring. Assess where all of these extra people flocking to the mission are coming from and why. I believe that they're coming from all over the county. Social service funding, therefore, should be diverted to Guelph. And this seems to be the most positive solution I've found in any media about the homeless substance abuse world. Hire more mental health workers to accompany police. They are trained, and I know in the end that they could actually save the whole system more money by averting expensive 911 calls. I haven't even touched on the justice system. In talking to our on-the-street police, and I've talked to many of the guys, they are frustrated by the instructions not to charge people with drug offenses, and also the revolving door of releasing people who are charged right away only to commit more crimes or spread their selling of drugs. This has to be managed like the crisis it is. That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Barb, for your presentation. Greatly appreciated, and the points you've raised. Thank you very much. Okay, all right. Councillor
Mr.
Auld?
Chair, yeah, I think there might be some questions to the delegate. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Auld?
Thank you, Chair McSherry. I hope that I'm heard well and that I don't get, this doesn't break up. Thanks, Ms. Manette, for the presentation. It's truly appreciated. you've raised a number of concerns for me, some of which I'd like to ask you about, and some which I think I would like to ask either Chief Kobe or other members of the police staff about as well, because I think that there's a number of things that have been raised. You made reference to the Royal City Mission, lots going on that needs monitoring. And I just want to clarify, as much for the public record as anything else, you are not scapegoating the Royal City Mission, I believe, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to comment as well.
Well, I believe that they are doing good work, but I believe that they're out of their depths because of the numbers that keep coming. And I believe that it has affected the traffic on our street. So it's just like, I don't know. As I said, I haven't seen this level of drug taking and violence and erratic behavior anywhere in my travels in the last 2 years. It's just very unfortunate. They're doing good work, but it's just very unfortunate that they are affecting the lives of people who work downtown. I mean, it's hard enough anyway to be a downtown business. So this has just really put a...
And I appreciate that. I recognize the proximity of the bookshelf and the Royal City Mission.
Well, it's just not just the Royal City Mission. There's like behind us, there's the other church, and then there are the safe injection sites, and then there's a community health center. We are in the middle of a storm. I mean, you might go to where City Hall is and you might not know what's going on because it might be all fine there, but it's not fine where we are.
Yeah.
And sorry, Phil. And honestly, I know that it's not a large percentage of people who are causing the problem, but it's also scaring the people who are going into the mission. They do not like it either. We're not doing anyone any favors by allowing this behavior to continue day after day after day.
You made reference to the phrase, there's a lot going on that needs monitoring. I was wondering if you could just unpack that a bit, please.
Okay, so I wanted to go in and follow that guy because he went into the Royal City Mission. I'd like there to be some work done with the city and the mission about behavior that's going on, who they will serve. Like, I just don't think that guy should have been able to just walk in there and receive some food. And it just, to me, it means that it's okay to be like that. And I know sometimes, quite often, that behavior is out of their control, but at the same time, I just don't think it's solving the problem. It's making things worse. A few people are making it very bad for people who are in unfortunate circumstances anyway. So if we can help them have a safer environment, it's better than just closing our eyes because, well, I wish I could close my eyes, but I can't, obviously.
Okay, and thank you very much. Chair McSherry, I think I do have a couple of questions for the chief or other staff members, but I'm wondering if you want to go to other people who might have questions first.
I believe the mayor had a question. All right.
No, I think I put my hand up earlier, Mr. Chair, to ask about also the increase in mental health workers in connections with the police. And you then said it in your deputation, which I didn't know was coming. So you've answered my question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else? Then Councillor Alt, you may proceed.
Thank you very much. To Chief Kobe, or perhaps one of the deputies. I was wondering, Ms. Manette raised some fairly important issues with regards to downtown officers. And I was wondering if it would be possible to hear from someone on the effectiveness of the downtown officers, their role, the impact, and how these officers interact with the public, both the public downtown and the proprietors of various businesses.
Sure. First of all, I want to thank Ms. Manette for delegating today. Now, Councillor Alt, next in the agenda is actually the summary that we've prepared, the board report for the downtown staffing initiative. So would you like, probably I'm going to answer it twice, or we jump ahead to it now, or we just wait till that part in the agenda? I just want to check what the preference is.
I'm not bothered one way or the other, but I thought it appropriate for Ms. Manette, because this is such a concern for her, that it be addressed while she is present. I don't know whether she's planning on staying or not.
Well, I'm going to suggest we have a very full agenda today, so I'm going to suggest that we, we're going to be here very late with the budget, so I'm going to suggest we stick to our agenda. Vice Chair Armstrong, you had your question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. And again, thank you very much, Barb, for bringing that, your concerns here. I'm just wondering, are you also, or have you considered also delegating to the city and perhaps contacting our MPP? Because
I've done that many times. Like,
okay, thank you.
I continue. Cam can tell you. Like, I'm just like, oh my God, I just need to keep on sending messages because it's happening.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you, and thank you for continuing to bring it to all of our attention. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Manette? In that case, I'm going to thank you very much, Ms. Manette. There is another item that will be coming up fairly quickly where we discuss the report that's been mentioned about the downtown supplemental staffing. So you're welcome to stay and listen to that if you would like. So my next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a mover? Councillor Alt, seconded by Mayor Guthrie. In favor? Opposed? Carried. And next item is I need a mover and a seconder for the consent agenda. Do we have a mover for that? It'll be
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to
yes.
do a point of order there. Normally you could ask if anyone wants to pull something to have a question on, and I'd like to pull the calls for service report, please. I have just a few quick questions on that. If I could do that, and then we could move consent, or we can move the remaining of consent.
Okay. All right. Anybody all in favor of? Sorry, do I have a motion from the mayor then to move 6.4 out of the consent? And do I have a seconder for that?
Well, actually, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, just to help, what we could do is I could move a motion for the rest of the consent, and then we could just stick with the one I've pulled to ask a couple of questions on, if that's okay.
Fair enough. I'm just I was just looking for a seconder for that. So, do I have a seconder? Vice Chair Armstrong, in favor? Opposed? I declare that carried. Okay. Next item, 6.4. Calls for service semi-annual report.
Yes. Thank you. Is it over to me then, Mr. Chair, for a moment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Through you. Yeah, I just was wondering, can you just try to give me some perspective on the amount of calls that have to do with mental health? I see the like well-being checks, but I'm trying to dig down into I see mentally ill people at 880. And is that the only kind of descriptor for that data point, or am I missing something else?
So I'm going to start, and then Deputy Gill, Deputy Gates, if you have anything to add when I'm done. So I think if you look at the 2023, so I'm looking at top 10 calls for service there, that chart.
Yeah, I'm on the same page, Chief, page 7 of 11. Yeah.
So what you're going to find is often, so whether it be compassionate locate, unwanted person, suspicious person, so many calls originate as a certain type of call, but the root cause of the call is a wellness related issue.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
so I think like it would almost be easier to picture of it more in if we're tracking for 90,000 calls for service this year,
Yeah.
I suspect 30% of that 90,000 are wellness related.
Wow.
So we could certainly not say it's 880. Deputy Gill, and I could get you a better number than 30%, but it's thousands and thousands of calls that are related to wellness.
Yeah, for sure. And if I could just jump in for a moment, when I see still staying on page 7 of 11 there, when I see the 2022 column that says 1,010, is that the cumulative 12-month total of 2022? And then for 2023 column, that's not the full year. That's just January to June.
No, that's a reporting period compared evenly. So that's those are.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I wasn't looking at an annual compared to just January to June. So thank you. Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you. If one of our deputies wanted to jump in.
Steve, did you have anything to add to my?
No, Chief. I think you explained it well. There's certainly the possibility that in terms of call clearance, obviously mental illness and drug calls often go together, and how they're cleared. It's very, very difficult to have a concise clearing for each of those calls. So there certainly could be more calls or a higher rate of calls in terms of wellness and mental health.
Okay. And I was just wondering, is there an overlay on the calls data from the impact team? So this is what the officers are going and they're referencing, but how many of those calls does the impact team go on? Because there's thousands and thousands and thousands of these calls that are more, mental health, well-being sort of category or theme, as you said, Chief. Where would the board be able to find the overlay of the impact connection?
So we would get those directly from CMHA because they keep great stats. But to kind of give you an example, impact comes as often as possible. And then the reality is, though, they don't work 7 days of work 24/7. So I think, and I'm going to give an estimate because please don't quote me on the number, but it's probably approximately 30% of the time they're available to a company. The vast majority of that 30%, when they are available, they can give timely, better, less intrusive care, greatly reduces referrals or times when we have to take people to the emergency department. There's no doubt it's the right person, right time, right care. I'd have to get you an up-to-date number, but it's around 30% of the time. It's that other 70% of the time when impact's not working or available that our members remain the only option to support those in crisis.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I didn't give you a heads up on any of this, so I really appreciate that. Maybe I'll just leave Mr. Chair with a request, and hey, I'm not in charge. It's up to everybody here. But it'd be interesting next year or in the next cycle of the calls for service, if the impact data was somehow correlated or something was in there, so we can get a more fulsome view of, calls to service, which includes them as well as they accompany. Maybe a column that just says how many they accompanied, that just so we can sort of see that a little bit more. I know it'd be interesting data for me. If it's not for others, then I respect that. But I think they do kind of go hand in hand about the overall call for service that I think would be relevant. So I'll leave that as a comment and a takeaway for staff and such. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions arising from Mayor Guthrie's questions and the Chief's answers? Hearing none, I'll declare that closed, and we'll move on to. Oh, sorry. Have we?
I'm happy to move that then, Mr. Chair. That one report then consent is done. If you want, I'll move that one.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Alt. All in favor? All in favor? Opposed? I declare that carried. Okay. Next item we can deal with is the downtown supplemental staffing report, and I'll turn that over to you, Chief Kobe.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I'm sure the board will recall, in April, you approved the transfer of $260,000 to support a supplemental staffing initiative to Ms. Manette's delegation. This was done to ensure that we could respond to community needs and very, very often articulated community wishes for a more proactive presence downtown, to support our downtown stakeholders, which include our businesses, visitors, residents, and our most vulnerable. So over the last several months, we've been taking part in this initiative. And I'll just remind for any of our public or media partners watching, we said at the time, we don't have the resources to do this. So our members gave up their own days off, time away from work with family, etc., to make this possible. So of the 151 days of the initiative, we were able to have members deployed 136 days. And so if you think, in addition to Connor, who does tireless work in our downtown, in addition to our frontline response, who try to have one dedicated person, these were two additional resources with a primary focus on being active and present in our downtown 7 days a week. Anecdotally, and I'll get to the statistics in a second, anecdotally, in the time I've been here, I don't think there's ever been an initiative that I've received more positive feedback on in my role as chief. Our community, our members really enjoyed the opportunity to have so many people would come up to our members and thank them just for being downtown. So they really enjoyed those positive interactions. We made a commitment to apply some data to the analysis of this. So as you can see in the board report, the surveys were handed out both to Downtown Business Association as well as visitors and those just walking downtown. 76.7% of respondents noticed that increase in police presence. 42.4% had an increased feeling of perception of safety, and just under 71% supported funding for an increased police presence in our downtown. What I think is really important to note is that we know it's not sustainable to run an initiative like this indefinitely on overtime. It's not financially viable. We can't run things based on overtime. It's not economically viable. But equally as unviable is we can't ask members to do this on their days off indefinitely. So I know we're going to talk about the budgets moving forward. Part of the plan for next year's resource allocation is to provide immediate relief, to provide additional support to our frontline patrol and our communications. There's phased-in approaches, and we can talk about that further. But as we get more into the report, you can see that our increases in patrols, I believe, tripled from the year before. So, and I'm sure Ms. Manette would have noticed far more police presence this summer than ever before downtown. However, what we need to remember, in addition to the proactive patrols, the downtown remains a very, very busy area operationally. Like, there's still a lot of traditional police enforcement that happened in our downtown. I provided the summary there with respect to 542 unwanted persons trespassing, vehicle stops, 529 assist citizens, thefts, etc. 248 arrests, almost 500 criminal code charges. So these are all kind of in addition to the proactive patrols, the traditional enforcement that continued to happen both by the downtown officers and our frontline patrol and other units. So, Steve, anything to add?
I think you covered it very well, Chief. The only thing I would add is to build upon your comments from the officers. Certainly the feedback that I got from our officers is that they enjoyed the opportunity to be proactive for a change and have the interactions with our community in the downtown.
And Daryl, anything to add?
Very similar to what Steve just said. It's a little bit of old school, and I'm older than most on the call, especially the officers, but it's a little bit of old school policing. We've had the opportunity to be proactive, get out of the car and interact with the people that you're there to keep safe. And that's huge. It's not just keeping them safe, it's the feeling and perception of safety. And we had a presentation at the start that speaks to just that. People need to feel safe for them to come into our businesses downtown. And having a good, thriving downtown is key to any city. And the mayor will be, I'm sure, very alive to that fact from his committees that he's been across on the province, that you need a healthy downtown core. And this is one strategy to do it, but it's not sustainable in the current format.
Thank you. Is there any discussion questions or comments from members of the board? Mayor Guthrie?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So I just wanted to drill down, if you didn't mind, about the summary codes of the different categories of the interactions and the outcomes of those interactions that were had with people. I see like unwanted people, 542 vehicle stops, 529, assisting a citizen, 332, theft 194, mental health calls 79. And I guess my first question is, do we not have a total to compare to 2022?
We could absolutely get that total. Steve, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, we could certainly get that total for you. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it would be accessible.
Okay, because there's like up above in the beginning of the report, there's occurrences, and it says here the 2022 and 23 numbers. But because this was a pilot project, I guess what I find is missing a little bit in the report is to determine the benefits of a pilot project is to compare. And I've got nothing to compare to here. I mean, it probably won't be a surprise, Chief, that it will be higher, but I have to find, just speaking for myself, I need a comparison here to determine whether or not we're getting the best bang for our buck. Because over, I would imagine, if I'm right, the annualized cost for this is somewhere in the, is it $500,000 to $600,000 if we were to make it permanent? Am I wrong on that, or?
Well, the goal is not to have a permanent special team, but rather, so we would have Connor, who will always remain. But yeah, our goal, so as part of the budget package we're going to discuss later, our goal is to have properly resourced platoons, so that much like probably when Steve first started here, every day, 24/7, somebody is primarily assigned. They are downtown. So it's almost like the beat officer. So for the lack, that's maybe a legacy term. So rather than not just having one unit, but the one person all the time, 24/7. So rather than just having special units, properly resourced platoons. So all this proactive work is built into how we do our policing. We're not always trying to react to different situations. So that's part of the budget development, rather than like a specific dollar amount for just this initiative. If that, we want it to be part of a holistic plan, not just continuing this initiative.
Okay. Okay. So if I could, through you, Mr. Chair, kind of repeat what you just said there. Hopefully I'm capturing it. What you're saying is that this pilot project, which included 2 more officers, 2 of them together walking downtown, may, if we were as a board to agree to a permanency of some sort of presence in the downtown, that presence may not reflect exactly what the pilot project was, with 2 officers walking together.
Well, and so the goal of the pilot project, because what we have to remember if the goal is to have 2 officers all the time downtown, that's probably a unit of 6 or 8, because, right, so you have 2 people, but they don't work all the time and they have days off and they have training. So very quickly, to have a schedule to just do that purpose, it becomes very, very elaborate. So it's not just 2 people. It takes many more people if we build just one special team for the downtown. So it would be very expensive. I'm sure Sarah could do the numbers, but so that's why if we have an ability to have properly resourced platoons to always ensure an active presence downtown. Daryl, I see you nodding, so bring some wisdom to this, my friend. I'm trying to.
So through you, Mr. Chair, if you had to look at pure dollars and cents, it may be cheaper to do overtime. Problem is, it's not sustainable because there's an impact on our officers, who the chief elaborated earlier. It's taxing on them to work, take a day off, and then come in on their day off, and not get a day off, and they're working 12-hour shifts. So rather than hire an FTE, it probably is cheaper to do overtime. However, it's not sustainable. And so I would, not to contradict you, Chief, but I think it would probably be more than 8 people if you wanted to do this. You'd have to, there's collective agreement implications, and very navigable, not prohibitive by any means, but that's something we'd have to navigate and try and figure out how we would do that. To put that, it's an overlay, and that is some of the recommendations of the KPMG is overlay another shift in there. So that's a potential for us to look at going forward.
Okay, I appreciate that. It's really good information. So just back to my original question, which is 2022 compared to 2023, I would really appreciate that information, because that gives me insight into what did the pilot project actually result in, because I need the comparison to be able to determine that. And then the last thing that I would say is I would be very curious to know, if you'll remember, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, we did a repeat offenders report. Maybe I could just ask this question without having actually to do some work, but do you, in talking to your officers downtown, for the officers that did do arrests, criminal code charges, actually, did their work of enforcement, did they make any kind of commentary or notice anything of the repeat offender issue? Constantly the same exact people that they arrested yesterday or out today, and right in the downtown core doing the same problems that they're having to re-arrest and recharge again?
So I'm coming to Deputy Gill here. We'd obviously have to get you the data for sure. I think it is very, the theme continues. The theme definitely continues. Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very confident. Again, I don't have the data, but to your point, Mr. Mayor, we will have several repeat offenders in the downtown.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So my last question, Mr. Chair, is we got budget conversations coming up in a little bit. If this were to remain, it might not be in this manner, but if a presence in the downtown were to remain, however you operationalize that, do we have any idea about the numbers that it would take to actually see that through?
We're building that ability into the budget we're going to talk about.
Okay. All right. And I lied. I have one more question. Was there any partnership that started to grow between these officers that were there and the Welcoming Streets initiative and or impact team?
Well, I would think so. We already have an outstanding relationship with Impact. So part and parcel for this pilot, we already have that in place. I wanted to bring it. So the one number that you're talking about, the stats, so the 356 compared to the 894, like those those 3 more patrols.
Yeah.
It would be, to be fair to those officers, they were there to, clearly there was enforcement that had to be done as well, but the primary focus was to have those positive, proactive interactions. So from a feel safe, from members of our community who got to interact with our folks, that 3-time comparison is an important stat from the intangible. How do you feel downtown? And as far as the welcoming streets, I'd have to follow up with Inspector Grover, who led the initiative. I think there's absolutely no doubt that the more we're down there, the more we improve our relationships with stakeholders. But I don't want to speak for folks that were down there. So I'd come back to you on that for sure.
Okay, I guess what I'm looking for is if a lot of these interactions, which are captured in some of the columns here, ended up being non-police issues, but they are the mental health and addiction issues. How often are those officers calling for some kind of a partnership connection with the social service Welcoming Streets initiative or with Impact to come? And was there any reason why Impact staff weren't actually walking with the officers?
The short answer, our officers call Impact whenever they can. Whenever they're available, our officers look forward to using them. I don't know, for example, how many days they were together. I don't know that Impact was available to participate in the same pilot project with them.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's very fair. Hey, I really appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question around the timing. I know this is 10 to 6, and my next question, I'm going to sort of preface by saying it's just my assumption. I would assume that a lot of the activity that happens downtown is after 6 p.m. Was there any particular reason we did the 10 to 6, or was there an option to do it a little bit later? Yeah.
So a lot of the feedback that we got was kind of the daytime hours for our downtown community was really important to have that presence during that downtown. The evening hours, like into the early and late evening, haven't been identified, certainly anecdotally to us, as much as those daytime hours when our businesses and visitors and stuff, people are going for lunch in the downtown. So that's why that would certainly be something why we would like to be able to have a 24/7 dedicated presence down there all the time. Steve or Daryl, any follow-up to that?
I would just say, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the importance of having our folks down there during the business hours was certainly key.
If I could just add in through you, Mr. Chair, the 8-hour time frame when we first discussed it was based on volume of persons in the downtown. And we also have, I don't have the metrics in front of me, but calls for service are a little bit higher. Traditionally, calls for service are, say, low at 3 or 4 in the morning, which is obvious. But they do pick up in the daytime around 8 o'clock, 9 a.m. They go up and they stay up to about 10 p.m. So we looked at the amount of money that we had, figured best bang for our buck, so-called, was this stretch across the board. And that's how we came up with the hours. We do have, it's not like we don't have anybody in the downtown. Don't want anybody to think we don't have anybody downtown after 6. That's not the case. We still have our officers down there through a program where we have one officer down there on each platoon. They're assigned. They are our liaison for the businesses and social agencies down there. They do a great job in addition to Connor, who's day shift. So we still have a presence. We just increase the presence for that time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alt?
Thank you very much. I think this is a very important question, and it really does relate to something that Deputy Gates had made reference to, and that truly was value for money as well. As I'm listening to this, the question that I have, if we're looking at issues associated with overdose, deaths, violence, and crime of a significant manner, is it fair to say that it is disproportionately occurring in the downtown relative to anywhere else in the city? The reason I ask that, we have homeless encampments, we have other hot spots in the city, and I just want to know how we are responding elsewhere relative to this.
Well, I think relatively, there's no part of our community that gets more police presence or police resources than our downtown. And I'm not saying that's good necessarily, because that's probably required in other parts of the city. But if you think so, 2 downtown people plus Connor when he's working, plus 1 person dead, that's 4 people downtown. Most of the rest of the city has 10 most days. So there are many other opportunities to increase how we're supporting other parts. But as far as areas that we receive the most concern about, it's certainly our downtown. But that doesn't mean it's not happening other places.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will declare that item closed, and we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the 2023 capital budget and forecast and 2023 budget additions. Chief Kobe.
Okay, I'm going to just give kind of a brief a summary, and then Sarah can walk you through any changes. Obviously, you got the original capital budget a couple of months ago. Number of changes were made after we had an opportunity to have discussions with city staff. You'll note that the 10-year, so now the capital budget as it is there is funded both from a 4-year budget to a 10-year forecast. A number of key projects were either deferred outside of the 10-year forecast. Sarah, do you want to take just a couple of minutes and pull out the high points for the board?
Sure, Chief. So just to go through the report, I'm going to start with the second part of the recommendation first, which discusses 2 projects that we're asking the board add to as part of the approved 2023 budget. So there's one new project, which is the CCTV project. You'd originally saw that in the July report included in 2024. However, we recently received an announcement from the provincial government that we received $200,000 grant. So we're asking that the board add the CCTV project to the 2023 budget in the amount of $495,000. And that will allow us to leverage the provincial grant in the amount of $200,000 before the provincial year end of March 31st, 2024. So we want to get going on that project. And the balance of that funding will be reallocated from existing approved capital projects. And additionally, we're also asking for the approved budget for NG 911. So the provincially mandated upgrade to our 911 system be increased from $1 million to $2.4 million. And that's presumed all to be grant funded. And that budget increase reflects what's been included in the grant application, plus what's already been spent. So that's the 2023 budget additions. In terms of the 2024 to 2033 capital budget, we're seeking approval for what is being requested reflects, as the chief just mentioned, a $26 million reduction over what the board saw at the July meeting. And the reason for the reductions are outlined in detail on page 4, but essentially these reductions were achieved through a revision in our inflationary assumptions over the 10-year forecast. So there is a bit of risk there, as well as the deferral of 2 large projects. So the indoor range and the 4th floor upgrades. So those have been moved outside of the 10-year period. So that's the report in a nutshell. The projects are all described in detail. The remaining projects are all received or are all described in detail in the body of the report. But if there's any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Sarah, maybe you're the best to answer. I'm not sure, but do we know if there's any operating impacts from the CCTV funding? Like, I see that the $495,000 required isn't actually like taxes; it's grant and reserves being moved around. So that's the revenue source for that is fine. But what happens when it's all installed? Are we going to be hit with a $500,000 operating cost? I just don't know what that is.
No, that's a good question. So for CCTV, in the 2024 budget, you'll see a request for a prorated licensing fee amount of $23,000. And then the annualized amount, we're estimating $140,000. We're still going, we'll have to do some procurement around that, but
Okay.
we're estimating an annualized cost of $140,000 a year for licensing. Deputy Chief Gates might have a bit more information on that, but.
All right. Unless there's more to say, that's a fair answer. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Vice Chair Armstrong.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I wanted to make sure I understood. So the funding of the CCTV, part of it is coming from other other projects in the capital budget. Are those overages that we won't need, or what's happening with those projects?
So there's 3 projects identified. 2 of them, 2024, they will need to be repaid. So there's surpluses anticipated for fiscal 2023. However, that's predominantly due to supply chain issues. So things haven't come in, or we haven't been able to order things in order to spend the money this year. The amount from the Pride capital project, that is a true reallocation. The expenditures that were being charged there were operating in nature, so they've been reallocated to be funded from operating, and that is surplus funds.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments? Okay. Then I need a motion that the Guelph Police Services Board approve the Guelph Police Service 2024 to 2027 capital budget in the amount of $6,584,900 in 2024, $3,266,600 in 2025, $4,448,600 in 2026, and $551,700 in 2027, and that the Guelph Police Services Board receive the Guelph Police Service 2028 to 2033 capital forecast in the amount of $5,117,100 in 2028, $4,378,800 in 2029, $5,711,700 in 2030, $4,037,700 in 2031, and $4,918,700 in 2032, and $7,449,300 in 2023 for information purposes. Okay, so if I can get a motion for, and as well, sorry, moved by Mayor Guthrie, seconded by Vice Chair Armstrong. In favor? Opposed? Carried. Second motion we need that the Guelph Police Services Board approve the addition of capital project PSO 111 CCTV in the amount of $495,000 to the 2023 capital budget, funded from $200,000 in grant revenue from the province of Ontario, $130,000 reallocated from PS 0067 growth vehicle, $123,800 reallocated from PS 0087 Pride Capital, and $41,200 reallocated from PS 0083 Executive Administrative Equipment, and that the signing authority for this project, as outlined in Appendix A, be received for information, and that the Guelph Police Services Board approve the addition of $1,400,000 to the approved capital project PS 0089 NG 1911 to the 23 capital budget funded from the province of Ontario grants. Can I have a mover? Mayor Guthrie, seconder, Mr. Sharma. In favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Next item on our agenda is the operating budget. So I turn this over to you, Chief Kobe.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And it'll just take, I just have to open up to share my screen here. I'm going to ask that, let's see here. So just the way sorry about this. So I have so many screens open here. If you can let me know when you can see the screen. You should see the slide show now, Mr. Chair.
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay. Okay, so you should see, can you see your, how about, okay, so sorry about that, folks. There's a lot of screens here. So I wanted to, first of all, thank the board for your support over the last year. A lot of work has gone into building this budget. What we want to do is we're trying to take a really concerted long-term look to make sure that we're planning to make sure our city is future ready. And we're committed to doing our part to keeping our community the safest and healthiest city possible. You'll see later on in the slides, for many years, we were the safest community out of the 35 census metropolitan areas in the country. Our goal is that we get back to that, certainly closer than we are now. The reality is, for us to achieve that, we're going to have proactive investments to ensure we can continue to provide adequate and effective services. The kind of service that Ms. Manette mentioned in her delegation, the kind of service that our community wants and deserves in a way that's safe and sustainable for our members. The budget that we've developed is what is required to support our community in this regard. I know everyone has the slides, everyone's read the KPMG report, so I'm going to pull some highlights so that we can be ready for questions. As you all know, KPMG did a service delivery review for us. And in addition to our work internally, we specifically engaged them to assist us in ensuring we're well positioned to meet our community's needs now and moving forward. It's important to highlight that KPMG brought an extensive understanding of our community to the project. In addition to completing our audited financial statement each year, the year previous in 2021, KPMG did a service delivery review for the city of Guelph. So in fact, the same partner, Mr. Bruce Peaver, who led the city's review, led our review. So we're grateful for kind of the holistic, the comprehensive knowledge that he brought and the support that they've given in helping us develop a critical roadmap to provide service for the city of Guelph moving forward. As you know, the list of recommendations are here. I'm not going to read all the recommendations because I know everyone's read this, but some of the key themes that surfaced was a realignment and optimization of existing resource to increase the effectiveness and the capacity of our members. In addition, resource enhancements and to develop what we're calling a supportive staffing model. We're going to touch on that, but that's to help mitigate the effect of presumptive legislation and long-term leaves that our service and services across the province are all dealing with. Now, Mr. Chair, just so you know, you're the only person I can see. So if anyone has a question you want me to stop, please feel free to put your hand up. I can't see anybody else.
Okay.
As you can see, KPMG gave us a moment in time set of recommendations as well as the estimated resource impacts. We've already begun to start to implement this roadmap. As you can see on this slide, obviously Deputy Gill we now have a second deputy to assist as we build the service moving forward. We've hired one of our 3 analysts that have been recommended and we're in the process of finalizing other staffing actions. We have a lot of work to do, and we feel pretty confident. This is the plan in order for us to achieve the recommendations provided by KPMG. As you can see, this is what the budget looks like for the next several years. If we look at 2024, base budget is the vast majority of the budget projection. We've made assumptions for contractual agreements, collective bargaining, etc. A key critical piece of our investment next year is the supportive staffing investment. What we've tried really hard to do is to have as much as possible a smooth growth curve so that our community can plan, the service can plan. As indicated in the report, by phasing in the resource recommendations, there are costs, it lessens the cost impacts, but there is risk that comes with that. I'm going to touch on that more, but the reality is we're phasing in point in time recommendations. We will be in 4 years where they've recommended we should be today. As we start to go through some of the KPMG slides, I've just made some highlights. I'm not going to read all the slides. The complexity of crime, including cybercrime and human trafficking, has created a need for investments in new capabilities, the creation of specialized data analytics, etc. On this slide, you can see whether it be fraud, tech crime, etc. We continue to see huge increases, and on a lot of things, specifically like fraud that's appearing online, our clearance rate, our ability to solve these crimes is very low right now. We all know this. We've seen this slide many times. Guelph is designated to grow. Guelph will continue to grow. Guelph is growing at a rate that is one of the highest in the province, and we're planning on this, building in projections, not just us, but at the city to ensure future readiness. As the city has continued to grow, the service, while we've certainly made gains, you can see that we just simply don't keep up with city growth. So the plan in place is to try to get us on the path. We didn't get where we're at overnight, but we're trying to phase in the roadmap forward. In 2019, we had approximately 75,000 calls for service. We expect that to increase to approximately 90,000 calls this year. What KPMG has observed is this slide, kind of the theme from this slide is that you can observe. So the Guelph Police Service right now, based on the comparators conducted, we have the lowest number of active officers who are carrying the highest number of calls in the community that's growing the fastest. Our officer complement remains lower than our comparators. KPMG, a point in time recommendation, we would need 19 officers above our authorized complement to maintain the average of that comparator group. So not to be 20, 30, 40, 50% above, to be at the average, today we would need 19 additional officers. This is a really important piece. I know we've talked about this before. Our current staffing levels have resulted in a very, very limited ability to be proactive. So we touched on this earlier. Our community needs to know, we all need to understand that the vast majority of days we have 11 or 12. We designate one of them, if at all possible, to be full-time to the downtown. Most days we have 10 or 11 people to respond for calls in our entire community. And many days that requires overtime to make that happen. You'll see as we move forward, overtime is increasing, lost sick time, or time lost due to sick leave is increasing. We have no ability right now to be proactive. For example, we've heard delegations earlier this year about the importance of noise enforcement, speed enforcement. Like many communities, we have people who go to bed in neighborhoods and they're worried about vehicle thefts. We do not have the ability right now to have members who are proactively patrolling neighborhoods or proactively doing so many things we would like to do because we are constantly responding to calls for service. As you can see, after reaching a record high response times priority 1 in 2019, we achieved some reductions last year, albeit only 6 seconds. our priority one response times began to come up again in 2022. A very, very important slide. So this slide, again, after record highs in 2019, we achieved favorable trends. The green line here represents overtime paid. The blue line represents overtime taken at a time. This red line represents the medical absence. So times members are off due to sick leave. These numbers, they're not sustainable. I would suggest that overtime levels, clearly, we can't run a business on overtime. We can't run a business if we don't have people. And what we operate at around 10% long-term off-duty sick. This number, that percentage can increase extremely quickly. We could go from 10 to 14% very, very quickly. Investment in police service impacts crime rate. So we have made significant achievements. So here you see from 2010 to 2022, for many years, I think it was a point of pride for all of us, of the 35 census metropolitan areas in this country, we were first or second safest in the country. We went from second to 8th to 19th in about 6 years. So during this drop, I can't speak for that. I wasn't here. I got here in 2019. The leadership team and the service that you have here, it's our job to make sure this doesn't happen. We've achieved some improvements over the last couple of years. We've now kind of leveled off at 12, which is certainly better than 19. It's certainly not where we want our community to be as one of the safest and healthiest cities in the country. To give you a frame of reference, to give you some context, the blue line, as I just pointed out, is Guelph's census metropolitan area. The red line is Barrie. With the exception of 1 year, the city of Barrie has been in the top 3 safest census metropolitan areas in the country. It might surprise a lot of our residents to know that the city of Toronto still remains in the top 5 census metropolitan areas. It might surprise some of our community to realize that other census metropolitan areas, including Toronto, Ottawa, Quebec, Hamilton, as census metropolitan areas, they have lower overall crime severity indexes than we do. We're working very hard to get us back to where we want to be. We didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get back to number 1 overnight. This is the plan to try to get us there. We've talked a lot about our break, enter, and auto theft team in the last several years. This is one area where we were able to make, with the support of the board and the community, a proactive investment in a very important area that was impacting our community, and the statistics speak for themselves. This unit has been able to have a huge impact on break, enter, and auto thefts in our community, but there's many other areas we could be doing this, whether it be frauds, whether it be proactive engagement with our community, whether it be community events, whether it be human trafficking. There are many areas that we need to improve upon that we simply don't have the resources right now to do that. KPMG, so for anyone who's read this slide, this is a pretty in-depth slide. The theme is KPMG has said we remain affordable rather to similar size services. So they talk here about net cost per current value assessment, unweighted assessment value. We wanted to understand what does this look like? What does this look like in our community? What does this look like across the province? The BMA municipal study. So this is a study that many municipalities participate in. This study, for anybody watching, is accessible from our City of Guelph website, from the financial report website. We wanted to understand what does our investment look like relative not only both other cities and policing, but our own community, because I think we have a responsibility to give you and our community the context with which we're making this decision. If we look at the BMA report, so this is the 2022 BMA municipal study. If we look at the municipal policing comparison, so what we've done here, so these cities represent all tier 1 municipalities in the province of Ontario between 100 and 500,000. So the red line represents the average investment in policing across all those communities. So the average investment per current value assessment is 325. We're at 224. So we felt it was important to not only understand what's it look like about policing, but how do we invest in other areas? Because we have a responsibility to know that context. Here, so we took the same set of communities, so all tier 1 municipalities in the province of Ontario, between 100 and 500,000. The red line represents the average investment in all those areas in our own city compared to all those other cities. And as you can see, not only relative to other cities are we investing less in policing, but our investment in other areas relative to that investment in other communities is greater than policing. But also, I wanted to provide this in cost per capita because I think that's for some people that's an easier number to understand. So again, per person, this is all tier 1 municipalities. This is the average spending per person in all these areas. And if we look, so right now we're spending 92% of that average on policing relative to how we invest in other areas. And to give you a dollar average based on this BMA report, that's $28 less per person in our city on policing relative to other areas. So the theme of these slides, if I summarize these, whether we look cost per capita, whether we look CVA, whether we look relative investment across other communities in policing, or whether we look at relative investment compared to the average in other areas, we're investing less in policing compared to other cities or other business lines. You may have noted that one of the KPMG slides made reference that as a city, the city of Barrie is investing $110 per person more than the city of Guelph. So when I first started trying to learn about this, I didn't even understand how that was possible. Here, what we've provided is, and the reference docs later on in this slide deck for anybody who's interested, the Ontario Financial Information Return is a standardized way that all municipalities report their finances. Clearly, as a community, we are similar in geography, similar in size. We have significantly higher revenues, very significantly higher overall expenses, but we've invested $200 million less in policing. So no two communities are the same, but I think this is noteworthy. As we look closer, we wanted to understand, so what does it actually look like for resources? So right now, today, the citizens of Guelph have access to over 30 fewer police resources than the citizens of Barrie. So 30 fewer people to proactively engage with our community downtown, 30 fewer people to do other enforcement areas. And this is happening at a time when we are growing at twice the rate of Barrie. So as these numbers, these are already closing. This gap is already closing. If you look at community profiles, we're certainly not identical. If I look Guelph City Hall, I think we're about 15 kilometers closer to Toronto Airport than Barrie. We may be on the 401 corridor. They're on a different major highway. They have Georgian College. We have the University of Guelph. They're not identical, but they're certainly close comparators. So now I wanted to talk about our supportive staffing implement program. So 2024 will see the completion of this program that you initiated in 2023 with the mid-year approval of 4 sworn FTEs. This program will help us provide relief in backfill for members who have been off on medical leave for over a year with no prognosis for a return to work. And I know the board understands this pretty well because we've had a lot of discussions, but I wanted to take just a moment for our community to understand where this comes from. In 2016, the government of Ontario created a law where they basically recognized the trauma that first responders, police dispatchers, firefighters, and other first responders have to deal with. And they basically said a first responder who is diagnosed with PTSD, it is automatically presumed to be related to their work. So again, I won't read the quote to you because I know that you've read this, but we enshrined in law that first responders have incredibly difficult jobs, and they respond to many, many more traumatic incidents than the general public. So we started this law in 2016. We wanted to take a look overall, what's the cumulative trauma that the men and women of the Guelph Police Service have had to endure while serving our community after this law was passed. So since January 2017 to July 31st this year, our members have attended to over 1,000 sudden deaths and homicides. They've attended to 11 cases involving children under 5 years old, 77 deaths by suicide, 106 accidental overdose, and over 800 other deaths involving pre-existing medical conditions where no foul play was involved. So I don't know. I think it's impossible for me to paint the picture of what this is like for people. I recently had a conversation with a member of our service who they've attended over 400 human death scenes or postmortems, so autopsies. In 2023, in our city, our members in a 3-week period investigated 2 deaths of children under 5 years, and in one 48-hour period, our members attended to 3 deaths by suicide in our community. In addition to that, our members have investigated over 11,000 domestic disputes, over 1,100 sexual assaults, over 700 cases involving victims under 16 years old, and numerous serious and fatal motor vehicle collisions. And fortunately for the board, what it's like for our members. So if you can imagine a police officer who arrives on an incredibly tragic motor vehicle incident, they arrive on that scene, they take charge, they manage the traffic, they help victims, they often provide first aid, they often do everything that they can to, in that moment, support people who need their help. Then they investigate incredibly difficult, tragic scenes. And then very often, someone from that scene leaves that scene and they go to a home and they tell a mother or a father that their son or daughter is not coming home. And they do that all the time. They deliver that news in the most compassionate, professional way possible. They do it time and time again. And then when they're done, they get in their car, they get on the radio, and they take their next call. So, despite all of that trauma that our members have incurred, we as a service, as a community, and as an industry in this province, we've never increased or right-sized our WSIB budgets to support our members who need time away, or to support the members who remain, or to give the community the service they need and deserve in a way that's safe and sustainable. So I want to paint a picture here. So for obvious reasons, for very understandable reasons, members need time away from work. But we don't have the budget. We haven't budgeted WSIB so that if I'm away from work, if I'm away for work for a year, we don't have the resources so that that position gets staffed. So we have fewer and fewer people at work to take a greater and greater number of calls, to go to more and more traumatic incidents, to tell more and more mums and dads that their son or daughter's not coming home, with fewer and fewer people. It's not safe, it's not sustainable, and it's just, it's not acceptable. I know the board has seen this report. For any members of our community, for any members of our media partners, people need to read this report. This report was done in 2018. After 9 deaths by suicide occurred among serving and retired police officers in 2018. This report provided a number of very useful recommendations. and it demonstrated the urgency of supporting first responders. I believe the observations expressed in this report were very important then, and they've only grown in importance. You'll read in this report, according to the report, police officers represent 0.18% of the Canadian public, a similar number in Ontario. Put another way, 99.82% of Canadians do not carry the same responsibilities or responsibilities as the Canadian public. I'm not going to read all these quotes. Many of you have heard me read these quotes before. They've pointed out, the coroner's report, a panel of experts have pointed out that police resources are strained to a breaking point in many locations around the province. As I say that, I refer you to our resourcing relative to the comparator universe. These resource shortages may be real or perceived. They may be due to an unwillingness or inability to implement new models. But while decision makers grapple with these arguments, police members are burning out, many are becoming ill, and some are dying. This quote talks to the problem with not adequately funding. I am going to read you this quote. Staffing gaps contribute to an ongoing systemic deterrent to the disclosure of mental health issues, create a significant barrier to those who need to access and maintain proper care paths, and uphold a false expectation for fit for duty capacity that perpetuates stigma and self-stigma surrounding mental health and occupational stress injuries. The reality of staffing gaps must be confronted. So for our board, for our community, for anybody listening, we need to acknowledge right now today, statistically speaking, there are members in our community, there are members of our service and other police services around the province. There are people right now today, statistically in our service, they are struggling. They have gone to countless traumatic scenes. They may not be at a moment of crisis right now, but they are struggling. They could probably benefit from time away from work. They are not getting the help they need because they don't want to be the one that leaves their team with fewer resources to go to more traumatic incidents, to go to more and more calls. So they will stay, and they will stay until they break. And we don't have the right to do that. We have more than enough data now. We have 5 or 6 years of data. We operate at about a 10% vacancy. If we don't do something about it, we should assume that's going to increase. And in the police comparator, 10% is actually low relative to many other services. The enhanced resources, in addition to the supportive staffing, this is the phased in plan that we're trying to get to where we need to be. This will see the introduction of 6 sworn and 2 civilians over the next several years. As I said earlier, it's a responsible and balanced approach. We are phasing in point-in-time recommendations. We're going to be in 4 years where KPMG has suggested we should be today. So yes, there's costs. It reduces the costs. There's risks associated with that when it comes to the service we provide, when it comes to the burden we place on our members. And I'm asking the board to realize by phasing in the recommendations, we own that. We're making a decision right now to phase this in. In addition, this speaks for itself. Obviously, this budget's been built to meet our collective obligations. We're going to be going back into collective bargaining. Assumptions have been made, as well as a number of the other projects that Sarah touched on. We will continue to optimize existing resources. This includes a number of things that the board has talked about. I won't go through these. As stated, this is what the budget looks like. We're trying to find a smooth growth curve. We're trying to avoid 12% one year, 3% the next. We're trying to phase this in a way that's responsible. And finally, the board can read the slide. I just want to say thank you for your support. we've come a very, very long way. As somebody who's been doing this for 30 years now, we've come a very long way in building programs, reducing stigma. We still certainly have work to do. I think if you were to ask any police officer or their family, the number one way we can support our people is just give them the resources to have a chance to do the job that they want to do to support our community. And with that, Mr. Chair, I welcome any questions, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen here momentarily.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Kobe. Any comments or questions from any of the board members? Councillor Alt?
Thank you very much, Chair McSherry. Thank you very much, Chief Kobe, for the presentation. I've always struggled with comparators. Sometimes I think we compare apples and oranges, but I appreciate that what we're trying to do is make the case for how we can best police Guelph. Okay, and I get that. But there are two things that I do have to ask, and please understand this is within the intention of making the best decision. We made reference to crime severity, and for the public, I was wondering if you could please define what we mean by that. Are these crimes of the person, crimes of property, white collar crime? How is it defined so that people all are of the same understanding?
Sure. So the crime severity index, what that provides, it provides a measure of our overall crime severity, as well as our violent crime and non-violent crime. So what that is, it's the overall. So what I showed you was the overall crime severity index. That's a weighted average of the, and I don't want to say serious or not serious, because every crime is serious for whom was impacted. But what that provides, that's that's a weighting of the violent and non-violent, where we come up with the overall crime severity.
Okay, thank you. The other question is tougher, and in some senses is somewhat philosophical, but nonetheless, I think it is important from an economic perspective. When I looked at the amount that a city like Windsor is paying versus a city like Guelph, I had to question, I know that we believe, but how much can we document or identify that more spending will make us safer?
Well, I would suggest that, so I can't guarantee you how much we would have to spend to get back to 1 or 2. With very good certainty, I can tell you what's going to happen if we stay where we're at right now with respect to health and wellness and off-duty sick and all that stuff. So I hope, and my answer is kind of philosophical there, Councillor Alt, but it is, I hope that's helpful.
Actually, it is. And if you could just expand a bit on health and wellness, I think that probably needs to be restated a bit.
Yes. So we ask our members to help. So we ask the men and women of our service, so approximately 350 people, we ask them every day to help 150,000 people navigate life's most difficult moments and help them through their worst day every day. That's what we do. So, and it's often not always the specific traumas in the moment, but it's the cumulative impact of always doing that day in and day out. It's the cumulative impact of, I want to support the community. I'm going to take an overtime shift and be downtown, but I never get time off. It's like, it's for those of us who have been in this business for so many years, it's just the constant, and the slide, the coroner's report reference, it's much better than I can. 0.18% of our population helps 99 point whatever the difference is navigate life's most difficult moments. That's the burden we put on first responders, our police officers.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you, Chairman Sherry.
Thank you. Sorry, or Deputy Gates, did you have a comment to make on that?
If I may, just to add on to the Chief's answer to Councillor Alt, it's not an exact formula as to more police officers will translate into a lower crime rate. However, I can say that adding more officers does give us the capability of being more proactive. Right now, the men and women of this police service are going call to call to call, and they're strapped for resources, so they're not able to be proactive. We have seen through the downtown initiative where they can be proactive. They interact with our business owners and our patrons in the downtown core. There's a positive effect. We've seen the addition of a break-in and auto theft team. We've seen how proactive and how good they've been in terms of driving down those crimes. So when we're strapped for resources, we're going call to call, we're handling crises, and you kind of lose the scope of what we're trying to do, and that's crime prevention and making Guelph safe. So it's not a precise formula, but the additional resources will certainly assist us, not only in driving down the crime rate, but we can be a little bit more collaborative with our social agencies, and that's huge. And we need to engage with the different agencies in the city of Guelph. They are here, but we need the people to do it, and you can't do it if you're just going from crisis to crisis. So not exact formula, but it certainly is. I think there is enough science there to say it will assist greatly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Guthrie, I believe you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. So I was wondering, we're not here to approve the budget today. We're here to receive it.
That is correct.
Yeah, and then when does it come back?
Our next scheduled meeting, I believe, is October 19th.
Okay, good. So I would like to move a motion. Well, actually, I guess maybe you would need the recommendation put on the floor first to receive. So I'm happy to do that, Mr. Chair, if you want to find a seconder for that.
Sure. Anybody who wishes second to the motion to receive the Mr. Sharma? All in favor?
Okay.
Opposed? Carried.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess my motion would be a secondary to the main motion anyway, so I could do it as a standalone, Mr. Chair. So
Okay.
So I'd like to move a motion that staff. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of, especially sorry through you to Leslie, having to try to, she's probably like this, ready to figure out what to write. But I would like to direct staff to examine opportunities for funding the impact program to the amount of $750,000. And for those options to be presented back to the board at the next available meeting. So that would be I'll just see if there's a seconder for that before I go any further. Okay, thank you.
So seconded by Councillor Alt.
Yep.
All right. Is that your motion, or is there more to it?
There's no more to it, but I just wanted to speak to it if that's okay. Thank you. So we've actually heard from the chief today several times talk about the thousands and thousands of calls that our officers are going to in regards to mental health or well-being checks. And we've heard today, as we have in the past, that there is so many benefits to the program that is housed inside of police headquarters for diversion rates, for actually freeing up some more time for our actual officers to be back out onto the road to do the things that they need to do. And I know that the funding needs to normally come from the province. Everyone should know that I know that. Of course, I do. But I am. We are to a point here now that I think we have to collectively remember that there is only one wallet, and that's where everything gets funded. And I believe that there's probably some benefits here to having more complement and more staffing in the impact team. And so I guess what I'm looking for is just support to get some feedback back on that idea. And I would like to just suggest that whatever the report and information that comes back on that, that it is not a direct, well, we'll just add $750,000 to the police budget. I actually like to challenge the finance team and the senior leadership team here to see if there is an opportunity to reallocate some of the money that is being proposed, to see if some of this funding could be captured within the existing budget and or the use of reserves. And then we can have a discussion about it when it comes back. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Leslie, you have your hand up.
I do. I just wanted to read that motion back just to make sure it captures exactly what you're thinking so that I've got it correct for the minute. So I have that the Guelph Police Services Board directs staff to examine opportunities for funding the impact program to the amount of $750,000, and that those funding opportunities be presented back to the board at the October 19th, 2023 meeting.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much.
Okay. Discussion? Anybody else have a comment? Mr. Sharma?
Just a quick, and just going on, thank you, Mr. Chair, going to the mayor's point. And this may be and I may have just missed it, but do we have any numbers on how many mental health calls become violent and, police resources are needed? Is there anything along, is there any data that supports it? Starts off as a simple, maybe mental health call and impact is involved, and then police resources are needed, or, is there any data that supports anything like that?
I don't have it handy. We'd have to do that research. I know our model sees our members always go together with impact. And then once a situation is deemed, if it's deemed appropriate, our members can actually disengage and leave a CMHA worker in the situation. However, it's the team approach that we employ here.
Any other comments or questions? Then I'm sorry, Deputy Gates.
So just to add on to the chief's comment, it may be a very difficult, we can certainly have a look for that stat, but it may be a very difficult stat to pull out because a lot of times, our officers are trained to de-escalate. So their presence at the time in the moment where you may have something that's somebody's called in to say somebody's acting out of the ordinary, and we get there. You don't know what components of that call or that interaction is going to turn violent versus non-violent. So the officer may get there and may go, "Hey, this is impact." Come in and I've de-escalated this incident. That same person 3 days later, the officer may have the same interaction, and the person reacts differently, and that may be because of substance abuse or mental health issues. And then it's a different reaction. And then suddenly the mental health worker cannot engage right away at that time. We have to stay involved with the call a little bit longer before it makes sense.
I appreciate there very well may not be any data on that. It's such a sort of, focused in type of question I really asked. So, yeah.
Okay. So then I guess, sorry, any Vice Chair Armstrong, have you an opportunity to weigh in on this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm interested in hearing back from staff in terms of what the motion sets out. I guess I'd also be curious to know, if there was an opportunity to fund, do we have a sense of whether there are resources available? Because that to me would be the other hiccup here. I mean, should we even find that we have the ability to fund it, do we actually have workers, mental health workers, who would be available to support the program? And I think we need to know that as well. And I think it's a potentially a creative way of looking at this. I think it's, I welcome staff's response back. I think I would leave it at that. I'd like to hear back what your thoughts are at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think you're correct in the sense that the people would actually be hired by the CMHA, so that we wouldn't be directly hiring them. So this would be an agreement to work with them to make this happen. So it relies on cooperation that I think we would expect it would be met well, but it's not guaranteed. So anyway, yes. So I'll call the vote. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Carried. Okay, thank you. Next item. I'm sorry, and I'm sorry. Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, and I just had a couple of just a question. So back on the operating budget, just as we're going forward, and really it's in line with what Councillor Alt was saying. I just think going forward when we're receiving stats as to how we're doing from an operation standpoint, it would be helpful to be able to measure the effectiveness of the proposed increases to the FTEs that we're achieving. I appreciate it's not possible to guarantee the standing in terms of the the crime stats, but I think we'd also want to have a sense of the overtime budget, the number of absences, the closure rate. I think there are a whole series of measures that we could hear about that might be helpful if we're you've made a very compelling argument, and I thank you for the report and the information you provided, Chief Kobe. I just think if we're going forward and in fact we do support this, it would be helpful in future to receive just a series of measures that we can measure that we're doing is effective. So I think, in addition to comparing us to other municipalities, which certainly is a valid comparator, but just so from our own operation, we're able to measure that we're actually achieving what we intend with the increase in numbers.
Chief Kobe?
Sure, it's an excellent point. And in fact, the KPMG slide where they spoke of when we've invested, we've impacted the crime rate. It's worth noting that, so in 2019, we had record high overtime, record high response times, record high crime severity. We had a significant investment in 2020, and we saw improvements in all those areas. So the reality is the investments, like we just keep growing. The city just keeps growing. And so that's the thing. So we've certainly seen those metrics play out already, but we'll continue to provide those for sure.
Okay, and just reminding the members that you will be asked to vote on the operating budget at our October 19th meeting. Okay. Next item is the Chief's monthly report. Chief Kobe, I can turn that over to you.
Sure, and Mr. Chair, I don't have anything to add this month. Obviously, actually I do. Deputy Gill was going to give an update on homecoming, just a brief homecoming. We had a busy weekend. I don't think there was anything that was unexpected, but Steve, do you want to touch on that?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Chief, and through Mr. Chair. Homecoming is obviously a significant impact on our service and the community when it happens each year. This year, we partnered again with City Guelph Bylaw, Public Works, paramedics, the university, and Guelph Fire and Richmond Properties to coordinate our approach to what we suspected would be a significant gathering at the Chancellor's Way. There was approximately 5,000 people, we figured, that were at the party that evening, that day. But overall, things went fairly smoothly, I would say, compared to years past. the coordinated center here, the emergency operating center here, that we utilized all the services we were able to come to the Guelph Police Service here and work in a coordinated fashion. And overall, there was no, I would call, significant incidents. So homecoming went fairly well. So barring any questions, that's a quick summary.
Any questions from any or comments from the members of the board? Hearing none, I'll thank Chief Kobe and Deputy Gill for that date. Next item is new business. Is there any items of new business for our consideration? Hearing none, I'll declare that closed. Our next open meeting is going to be October 5th. Sorry, it should be October 9th, Thursday, October 19th at 2:30 p.m. via Teams and live streamed on YouTube. And motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Sharma, seconded by Mayor Guthrie. In favor? Opposed? Carried. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.